Councilmember Marin.
Thank you. Peter, I know that, well, I kind of think you've said in your memo that this was beyond the scope of your immediate research, but you talked in the memo about a lot of the parking problems being created in general by people not following the codes that we already have in place about parking so far from a hydrant and so far from a corner and all of that, right? So I'm wondering, do you know if the city has looked into what it would cost to put up signage? Just now, I realize there are issues with manpower for enforcement, but I also know we had this discussion when talking about finite parking area restrictions, that there's a certain amount of, what's the word I'm trying to find here? You know, that signage itself encourages people to follow the law better than, I think a lot of people don't even know what the restrictions are, frankly, when they're not marked. So I'm just wondering how expensive it would be to just put up that kind of signage. I know in a lot of other municipalities they have that. Although I would recommend, rather than no parking 30 feet from the curb, and I never know how far that is, those signs that say no parking from here to curb, it's pretty clear. Corner, sorry.
We did look at a variety of factors, and that portion of the information in the council packet was, Bob and I talked about it real briefly, and how we really address this factor. We thought we'd just hit head on. Here's some of the areas that may or may not be out there. From looking at just a hydrant standpoint, one of the things that's been discussed at council in the past in a variety of different areas was painting the 30 feet in front of the curbs. We have over 400 hydrants throughout the community, and so 400 times 30 feet is a lot of paint in man-hour, and that has to be maintained every 1 to 2 years. So it's really not a viable option to move forward with that. We didn't believe. Again, that's one of the reasons why we're looking for feedback from council on that. There are some communities who have placed some signs, done some painting on some of the curbs. Feedback we received from the council in the past was not to go in that direction for similar reasons, the amount of intersections that we have throughout the community and all of that. The other thing from a signage standpoint is similar to crosswalks and things, or even stop signs. So we have uncontrolled intersections because if you put too many stop signs, people get regulated to the fact that, well, 10 to 12 times that I was there was no one else, I'll just run the stop sign. So it becomes part of the landscape, and you also tend to start ignoring those. So there's a variety of different factors that we talked about.
We have run newsletter articles since 2007 that addressed many of these issues. Did that get read? We don't know. One of the things we did notice on McDonald was that many of the cars were 12 inches plus away from the curb, and that does narrow the access down that street. From a public works alone standpoint, snowplows and those types of things get affected as well. So there's a variety of different factors, and we just wanted to kind of get a feel for where council would like us to go. I believe we have some of that, but still listening for comment. Thank you.
Follow-up question?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So and this was probably before my time on the council. So you have looked at, I understand the problem with having to maintain paint on curbs, but you looked at the one-time cost of, say, putting up so many feet to the corner signs and that sort of thing?
We did not look at that throughout the community. Each one of those signs ranges from $20 to $50 each, $10 to $15 each for the poles, the manpower to put that up. That sign does need to be maintained if it's hit, knocked into and all those things. So there's actually an ongoing cost for that. The cost of replacing the sign itself usually only comes around a several-year period based on reflectivity and other damage to the sign there. But we did not look at that throughout the community. There was some discussion at specific areas of the community, and at that time we did not receive the direction to move that way.
Marin, did you have a follow-up question?
Well, I did. I would be interested to see what the cost would be of doing that sort of thing, because I've seen on certain streets there have already been signs put up that say no parking on one side of the street. So obviously it was determined that it was worth doing it in that particular spot. So I'd be interested to see what it would cost to put up signs like that in the areas that are most problematic, to sort of cut down on that generalized problem, aside from just focusing on certain areas where people can't park. Because, maybe the value would be worth the cost, and the cost might not be that high, as opposed to trying to do it citywide, which would be nice, but it sounds like something we probably can't afford to do.
Could I ask for just a clarification of, is there a specific street? I'm understanding maybe McDonald that you're pointing to, but maybe I misunderstood your comment.
No, I'm saying in any of these areas that have been looked at as problem areas, if those are areas you're already aware of as problem areas, if that sort of, I'd be interested to know what the cost would be of that sort of signage in those areas, not just in the particular pockets, a corner of a street, but that whole section of the street, to see if that also alleviates some of the problem of emergency vehicles being able to get through.
Sure, we can look at that and get a cost per linear foot and then give a rough order of magnitude estimate for that.
And part of that discussion with council is if the curbs are painted, the engineering standard essentially is
recommends if you have painted curbs, you also use signage. The same recommendation does not say if you have signage, we recommend you paint the curb. And a prime example of that we see every day and don't think of is a handicap sign in a parking lot. The standard is to place a sign, not necessarily paint the pavement. However, we typically see that. If there's a faded painting on the pavement and no sign, state law does not recognize that as being a marked handicap spot. So that's just one thing. We will take a look at that for just signage only, as I'm hearing, versus signage and curb painting. We were looking at signage and curb painting in the McDonald Avenue area, and the reason for that is we kind of have a trained citizenship there. They look for that. They tend to not park in those areas, and we just wanted to continue, those efforts and that kind of trained response to the corner.
Well, just one final thing. I have to say that I'm a little bit skeptical about relying on citizen awareness, because as a part of Northwest Landing, where there's a pooper-scooper law and rule or whatever, and knowing that lots of people have complained about it day in and day out, and having seen the darn notice in the ROE newsletter like every month, I'm pretty sure that it's not working for the 7 years that I've lived here. So, if we could pull it off, I certainly think that something else might work a little better.